Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving straight into a seriously transformative approach to community work. We're focusing squarely on Module 5 of the GBA Plus, or Gender Based Analysis Plus, community training course. We are stepping out of the realm of high-level government policy, and we're zooming right into the practical, on-the-ground reality of program design and service delivery. If you've ever had a hand in designing a workshop, writing a policy, or running a community initiative, well, this is exactly where the rubber meets the road.
So let me ask you, are good intentions enough? It's a tough question, for sure, but an absolutely necessary one. So often, we see organizations launch these really well-meaning, one-size-fits-all community programs, genuinely hoping to help as many folks as possible. But do those broad programs actually reach the most vulnerable people in our communities? Or do they kind of accidentally leave them behind? The research we're unpacking in today's explainer suggests that if we aren't constantly interrogating our own assumptions, even the very best intentions can end up reproducing invisible barriers.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick roadmap for today's explainer. First, beyond good intentions. 2, the assessment tool. 3, our digital literacy case study. 4, the seniors T case study. And finally, designing for substantive equity.
Starting with part 1, beyond good intentions, and why the whole one-size-fits-all approach usually fails.
We really have to start by establishing a fundamental truth about community service. When we design for the quote-unquote average person, we are very often just designing for the person who already has the fewest systemic hurdles in their way. We actually need to move away from formal equality and fully embrace substantive equity. Now, formal equality means treating everyone exactly the same, right? Handing everyone the exact same flyer, giving them the exact same class, the exact same resources. But substantive equity acknowledges a pretty profound reality. We are absolutely not all starting from the same place. Achieving substantive equity means treating people differentially so we can address specific, overlapping structural barriers. It's all about creating an outcome where a person's social location literally no longer predicts their likelihood of success.
Moving on to part 2, the assessment tool and the constant interrogation of assumptions.
So how do we actually achieve that equitable outcome in the real world? Well, it requires moving far beyond some simple administrative checklist. We need the GBA Plus Program Assessment Tool. As it's defined here, it's an analytical process. For frontline workers and local nonprofits, this isn't about massive federal budget allocations. It's a localized lens. You use it to proactively identify exactly who is being unintentionally excluded from your program design. It forces us to pause and ask, wait, whose voices define this problem? Who actually benefits from this intervention? And crucially, who is being left out because of unseen, intersecting factors like age, geography, language, or maybe a refugee background? And this brilliantly illustrates how the tool operates. It's just 3 practical steps that you can apply to literally any community initiative. Step 1, identify the standard program goal. Step 2, ruthlessly interrogate the intersecting barriers that are preventing marginalized groups from accessing that goal. And step 3, redesign the program specifically for substantive equity. To really grasp how powerful this is, we need to see it in action. Which brings us to part 3, case study, digital literacy, and closing the gender tech gap.
Let's look at a real-world scenario from the affiliation of multicultural societies and service agencies. So an NGO wants to close the gender tech gap for newcomer women. Naturally, the standard approach would just be to market a standard tech class to all women. But by applying the GBA Plus tool, they uncovered some pretty severe intersecting barriers for their most marginalized target audience. First up, these newcomer women have low Canadian language benchmarks. That means throwing complex technical jargon at them in English would be an immediate roadblock. Second, a lot of them lacked at-home internet or even their own laptops. And third, many came from refugee backgrounds, meaning they had interrupted formal education. If the NGO had just run a standard class, these specific women would have failed or dropped out, not from a lack of ability, but entirely because of structural exclusion. But here is the incredible makeover. Instead of just shrugging and going with the standard approach, they executed a complete GBA Plus redesign. The organization highly customized the program. They integrated English language acquisition directly into the technical training itself, so the women were learning the language and the tech skills simultaneously. And to top it off, they provided the necessary hardware directly to the participants. They didn't just invite them to a room, they actively removed the weights holding them back. I mean, just take a look at this. Substantive equity really means recognizing and then removing the unseen weights that people carry. The newcomer women in that digital literacy program, they are incredibly resilient. They are entirely capable. They just needed an organizational partner willing to design a program that met them exactly where they were, honoring their specific journey and the unique, compounded hurdles they had to overcome. All right, let's jump to part 4. Case study, Seniors T, and bridging the rural health gap.
Let's look at a completely different environment now. Imagine a rural municipality trying to give older adult newcomer women access to digital health services. I want you to genuinely ask yourself, if you wanted to teach digital health to older rural women, you'd probably just invite them to a formal workshop, right? You'd print out some flyers, set up a projector in a community hall, run a PowerPoint. Honestly, that is our default assumption for how education happens. But let's apply that GBA plus lens and see what happens to that assumption.
Well, when the organization actually interrogated the reality of these rural women, they found compounding barriers that would make a standard workshop a complete and utter failure. First, there was exceptionally high digital illiteracy. Second, and this is crucial, there were deep cultural taboos surrounding the open public discussion of women's health. Third, you mix age and geographic isolation in a rural setting, and a formal, intimidating workshop format would likely result in absolutely zero attendance. A standard digital marketing campaign for a health seminar was simply not going to reach them. No way.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer ingenuity of the solution. They completely scrapped the formal workshop. Instead, they designed a seniors tea. They created an offline, culturally familiar, highly social, and entirely non-threatening environment. The primary focus? Connection and community. And then, within that culturally safe space, they subtly integrated the health information and digital support. They looked at the intersection of age, geography, cultural norms, and gender, and innovated a program that bridged the gap perfectly.
And finally, part 5, designing for substantive equity and the real-world impact.
When we pull back and look at both that digital literacy program and the Seniors Tea, a very clear pattern emerges about what effective, modern community work actually demands. The core philosophy is perfectly summarized right here in this quote from the training framework. Substantive equity often requires highly customized, flexible, and targeted approaches to service delivery, rather than broad, generalized programming. It's an active, ongoing dismantling of barriers. It means accepting a hard truth. If a program isn't working for a specific marginalized group, the fault doesn't lie with the group. The fault lies in the design of the program.
Which leaves us with this final thought. GBA Plus is not just some abstract theory, it is a daily practice. Whether you're planning a community event, drafting a new internal policy, or launching a massive service initiative, you have assumptions about who will show up and how they'll engage. So, how will you interrogate your own assumptions tomorrow? How will you use these tools to ensure you aren't just designing for equality, but actively building substantive equity? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.